when it comes to ultra running, running 100 mile is not simply running twice 50 mile. It's totally different. And the challenge that you're going to face at longer distance are different. What I'm going to share with you today is how it feels to run different distances, what are the new challenges you're going to face at different distances, and what are the skills that you're expected to master before entering a certain distance. And importantly, and I think that's a question that is top of mind for a lot of people, is what is the typical weekly mileage that you need to put in training to be able to step up to this new distance and this new challenge. Something that makes trail and ultra running a great sport is that every race is different. The experience will be totally different. And it can be a little bit difficult when you're new to the sport to find what race is good for you. Hi, I'm Simon. I'm an ultra runner, mostly focusing on 100 mile, sharing these on YouTube, but I'm also taking the time to share my experience ultra running so that hopefully you can get into the sport and enjoy this great community and this great sport. Today I wanted to do a two-parter movie on helping you find your next race. So hopefully some of these videos I make will inspire you to say, hey, if this clown can do it, then I can do it too. Good luck. But choosing a race is very difficult. There's a lot of different distances, there's a lot of different factors, and I'm going to walk you through these factors in a different videos, also sharing my own experience with specific races that I love, and hopefully you can go and experience those too. But even before getting into that, one question that is very common is, are you ready? Are you ready to run your first 50K, or even are you ready to run your first trail half marathon? Are you ready to step up to a marathon, to a 50K, to a 50 mile, to a 100K, to a 100 mile, and even more? Well, that's a great question, and I have some good and some bad news. The bad news is that you'll never be fully prepared for what's ahead. Every time you're gonna race, especially a new distance, bang, you're gonna hit the wall at some point. But part of ultra running is adapting to new problem. But the good news is today I want to share with you some of the specific things that, at least personally, when I was stepping up distance, I was blindsided by it. There's no cleaner way to say it. I was totally blindsided. And for my non-American friend that don't know American football, this is a sports analogy, and it looks like this.
Oh, wow, what a blindside shot.
Wow.
If he gets up, I'll be surprised.
But watch 73. He gets the outside on Walters to the left part of your screen. Wow. 1,000 words that picture will tell you.
And none of those words will Jaworski remember after a shot like that.
At least if you know what are the skills that you're supposed to work on when you're stepping the distance, that's going to help you be ready. Because sure, if you want to work towards a training plan, I do have a video about that, and then you just need to know what's the kind of range of weekly mileage that you should target. And that's fair enough. That's definitely important in your preparation. But there are things beyond that when you're doing a new distance, this is going to be a challenge, and you need to work on that before being there so that hopefully your days goes a little smoother.
Question.
What's the ideal ultramarathon distance?
That's a ridiculous question.
I personally think that there's a lot of pressure to always do the longer distance, and I personally think that this is bull.
Well, that's debatable. There are basically two schools of thought.
Fact. Bears eat beets.
There's no better distance. There's no distance that is necessarily more challenging. Longer mileage doesn't necessarily mean harder. Some shorter races are much harder. And anyway, if your point is only to do hard things, then you could also just not train for it and then go do 100 mile and then be injured. So if that's what you're into, then you can do that. But I think you can have just as much joy from different distance, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I don't think you need to feel the pressure to do 100 mile or to do specific race. That in my mind goes against kind of the community guideline. Also you can have a look where whatever your goals are, these are beautiful goals, and I'm very happy to encourage that. And you should never feel ashamed of, well, now I need to do a 200 mile because this is what's the hot thing right now. You really don't. There's no ideal distance, and I even think that different distances come with a different vibe a little bit. And personally, I love the 100 mile. For me, the 100 mile is a distance that no matter the condition, it will challenge me. No matter the distance, I will never be able. For me, no matter the race, and no matter how good I feel before the race, I know that there's no guarantee that I'm going to cross that finish line. So I think this unknown, facing this unknown, is part of my adventure and my challenge that I very much enjoy. At the same time, I think this is a great distance where you're covering the night, but you're also not gone for 4 days. I'm gonna probably someday do longer distances, but I think the 100 mile is the perfect adventure for me, for what I would call a weekend warrior that has a more than full-time job. This is just the perfect distance. Sometimes even you'll hear me say, and I say sometimes, but I think I mean every time, you'll hear me say around 60 mile or 50 miles. I wish I was doing 100K right now, and I'll explain why later. But that's the thing. There's no wrong or correct answer here. So please don't come in feeling any pressure to do any specific things. Find a goal that for you will be a great adventure, and I'm gonna help you understand what are the different challenges at different distances.
Cardinals need 2. Cobb to throw, pressure, balls in the air. In the corner against Jeff King, no chance. And watch this spinal tap knockout shot. Wow.
I will often talk about ultra running and trail running as almost synonym. That's obviously not the case. There are ultra marathons that are road, and there are trail races that are shorter distances. So the first transition is really that, is moving from road running, potentially if that's your background, to trail running, and that can happen at different distance. Personally, I did that. I had a road marathon experience. I'm not a fast runner for road marathon, and then I did a first trail half marathon, and that's how I did the transition. And just that, and I'll make a full video about that because I think it's a big transition. It's bigger than it sounds. There's a lot of things that you're supposed to learn between running on the road with aid station every mile or to a trail half marathon where you need to adapt to running on technical trails. Sometimes you need to adapt to carrying more things with you. You need to adapt to being at the mercy of the trail, really. You're gonna have to walk the uphills much more. You're gonna have to slow down sometimes. You're gonna face a lot of single track. So you're not controlling the pace anymore. The trail is controlling your pace. And of course, you can always go slower, but it's hard to go faster sometimes. And these little things are kind of a big transition. So it's a smart thing to try and do a trail race of half marathon or marathon, even if you have a background in longer distances, just to get used to these little things, and also just getting the right gear for you. I think just shoes, for example, or running vest, or what you're carrying, maybe a rain jacket, will be a little different than you would for a road race. And that's the first transition. That's the first skill beyond just mileage that we were talking about that you need to adapt, which is now you're running trail.
Yates into the nickel. Gurteau, they come from the side. He is hit by Williams.
This quarterback, and whether he has answers versus the blitz, Marcus Williams, he's actually covering the tight end Fedorowicz. When he sees the tight end block, he comes screaming at the quarterback.
When it comes to a marathon, a trail marathon, let's say you make this transition at this point, the first big difference here that you'll notice is that you probably know what time to expect for a road marathon. And I'm not saying you'll know to the second, but you probably know if you're kind of a 3:30 guy or a 3:45 or a 4:30, and it's gonna be plus or minus 10 minutes. And no matter which road marathon you're doing, it's kind of gonna be fairly similar. When you're doing a trail, I have no clue what my marathon would be for a trail marathon if you don't tell me which one it is. So you'll have to look up the race, potentially. You can see what's the average finishing time if you're an average runner like myself. And then you can kind of gauge, and what you will see is that there's much less focus on pace, much less focus on what's your time, and much more focus on getting there. And those marathon, they tend to be well supported, even on trail, for kind of trail event. You'll have more aid station, typically maybe every 4 miles. You still need to be able to carry a fair amount of water. You still need to be able to face elements, and you're probably gonna have to be able to do some decent climbing. But it's a good adjustment to a road marathon. It's a good adjustment also to the new community. It's a good adjustment on just getting your gear squared away. And some of the problems that I think you should already be facing and hopefully you start working on will be things like your gear, just getting the right gear, maybe getting used to poles if it's a very hilly course, dealing with blisters. Personally, I don't typically have blister at this early, but if you're someone who struggles a lot with blister, now is a good time to resolve that, because once you're going to go in longer distances, that's going to be a major issue. So try and resolve that as much as possible before stepping up. Nutrition, it's still not the key focus in my mind. It's always important, but you can get away with not necessarily training nutrition as much as at other distances. Still you need to prepare for it, so you need to look into that, but you can get away with simple nutrition plan for that. In terms of weekly mileage, again, we're going ballpark here. We're going, you're an average runner, but you want to finish strong, or like maybe finish strong is never the word for any of these races. It's more a comfortable finish in the sense that you're pretty confident at the starting line that you could finish this race. It's not, there's 10% chances. You're very likely to finish unless something bad happened. I would say 40 mile-ish a week is probably enough to give it a shot. It's good to include some hill training. It's good to include some speed workout, but that kind of distance is probably what you're looking at. If you're already doing that, then hey, like why don't you give it a shot? I think you have a pretty good chance of finishing. And the biggest factor is probably to look at what's your long run schedule. And at a 40 mile per week, 40-45, we're not necessarily looking at back-to-back long runs yet. So probably you have one long run that you need to place in there, maybe in the 15, potentially even 20 mile would be the top that I would go for in preparation for that.
36. He's been hit and he appears to be hurt. Back-to-back roughing the passer calls.
Seen it a couple times today, Jim, where Matt Schaub is hung in there.
With so much force and pump to help.
All right, we're actually diving into the first official ultra distance. Some people are snub about it. They should watch my guideline video. I think this is great. You're gonna be an ultra runner after this one. You might be a little bit nervous about it. I think we all are. Marathon was already a big deal. In marathon, we were very tired after that the first time, and now you're doing even more. The first thing you need to see out of that is that a 50K is not just a marathon plus, give or take, like 8Ks. Those 8Ks are not just 8Ks. It's a significant difference, but physically the challenge will be fairly similar. I think you can get away with the weekly mileage of around 45, 50, but the biggest difference from what I've seen for a 50K is that the support tends to be a little bit more stretched. The running field also, usually there's less runners, so it's a smaller event, less at station, so you have to be a little bit more independent. But in terms of challenges, blisters will be as tricky. Nutrition becomes a little bit more important, but I would say it's not quite yet the turning point, but do start working very seriously about that, because very soon we're not talking about the running sport anymore, we're talking about the eating sport. But you're still, I think, in the comfort zone of you definitely need to work on nutrition, but it's not the most difficult thing. The most difficult thing, I think, is to have a consistent weekly mileage, building up to that, building up resistance, and doing these races. Personally, I skipped the 50K when I was ramping up from a marathon to my first ultra marathon. I went directly from a 50 mile. This is not something I regret. I think this is something that you can consider, but there's getting to a longer distance, if that's your goal, I don't think should be a race. It's not like you should be doing 100 mile as soon as possible. I think if you go progressively, you're going to face less difficulty in race because you'll have more time to learn. Your body will adapt through this slower progression, which means you're less likely to injure. And hey, you're 50K, you're going to have fun. It's going to be fun. Well, as always, I don't know if fun is the technical word that one should be using here, but I think you're gonna enjoy that experience. So doing it, totally cool. But if that's a distance you want to skip, I think it's reasonable, and the reason it can be reasonable is mostly if you're able to do in your training those longer runs and have that mileage, you will be prepared, because I don't think there are so many new skills that you need to learn between doing a trail marathon and a trail 50K. I think it's fairly similar. I think the difference between a road marathon and a trail marathon is actually a big gap, and I would really suggest doing a marathon first or a 50K, one or the other. Basically, the difference between these two, in my mind, is more physical than skill-wise, or learning how to deal with certain things. So if you're able to do that extra training, you can sometimes just skip ahead. We're jumping to the 50 mile. A 50 mile is a whole different story.
Plenty of weapons for one. Ryan from behind, the ball is loose. What a shot.
You make a mistake like this, and you're lucky if your quarterback's alive when you get finished with it. Here he comes, right? Absolutely.
The resemblance between the 50K or the marathon and the 50 mile, it's very different, very, very different. First, in terms of mileage, when are you ready? I think it's probably like a 55 miles per week is gonna serve you well for this distance. So as you can see, the physical training is not necessarily much more, but I would emphasize that it would be good at this time to have back-to-back long runs to get used to running on tired legs. But the difference in terms of skill that you need to master to have a good day on the 50 mile are very different. First, we're already starting to be on a trail for a very, very long period of time. Depending on your level and depending on the specific course, we're talking about starting at the crack of dawn and potentially finishing within early evening. It could be dark, for example. So these are already little things that, do you know how to run in the dark? Is that something you're comfortable doing? These are little things that you'll need to think about before getting there. It's looking at the race and thinking, well, am I going to finish in daytime or not? When it comes to support on the course, it's usually much more sparse. You're already starting to stretch it. I think aid station every 5 miles is probably the average. There are some courses that will be much more than that. Some courses may be less, so you need to factor that in. And there are things that when you do a 50 mile, you should be an expert at. You should be an expert now at dealing with blisters. You should be an expert at running on trail, running on technical terrain, climbing, pacing yourself smartly. In terms of the race experience, when you're doing marathon and a 50K, it will always depend on your level, but even at I would say like my level, so not necessarily the fastest guy out there, I'll walk the hills on the marathon or 50K, but I'll run everything else, and I even run some of the uphill. A 50 mile, not anymore. I'm most likely going to include significant amount of walking. I'm most likely going to take my time at aid station, making sure I refill. But the big one, the big reason why 50 mile is not just a 50K plus a 20. See, you should never do math live because that's a disaster. So a 50 mile is not simply a 50K plus 30-ish K. Is nutrition. Nutrition was always important, but that is the turning point. Now nutrition is one of the most critical thing you can do, besides just, training and having some mileage under your leg. Nutrition will make or break your race. That is almost a guarantee. Almost anyone who has, and I never like saying everyone or, but the most typical problem when you're at the 50 mile or above, most typical problem will be related to GI issue. It's either you're not eating enough, you're not drinking enough, you don't have enough water, you don't have enough salt, you don't have enough calories intake, and you're slowly crumbling down. It sounds easy to say, well, I'm just gonna eat a goo gel every 20 minutes. You can do that for a little bit, but eventually you're gonna shit yourself or you're gonna puke. There's two types of runners. There are pooper and there are pukers, and 50 miles is probably the distance that you'll realize which one you are. But regardless, it's coming out one way or the other. And if you've trained your back-to-back long runs, for example, because now it's getting important to have these in your training block, practice fueling. and practice different things. Don't rely only on one thing. It could work for a 50 mile. It has worked for me, but I think I have a pretty strong stomach. But more likely, at some point, if your main source is carbs, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna struggle taking that in, and it might be a good time to switch to something that's a little bit saltier, a little bit fattier, maybe something warm, something that works well for me at longer distance. But someone who would struggle, could be a ramen noodle, could be grilled cheese. There's a lot of different options that you can try, and trying these in training will help you avoid a big mistake. It's hard to keep running when you're at the edge of puking all the time because you took Coke, and Coke is something that really doesn't sit well with your stomach. By the way, Coke is a magical one for me. It always works, so also worth trying that one. But yeah, so 50 mile, also the experience is that you will get absolutely wrecked. You will not finish feeling strong, and that's true for every distance, but I think the 50 mile is also where you start also to need to ramp up your mental game a little bit. You're gonna be in that pain cave for sure. Bad things will happen to you, things won't go according to plan, you will struggle more than you expected, and that's where it starts to be important. Now, just like nutrition was important for the marathon distance, but not the most critical, and once you ramp up to 50 mile, that is the thing. I would say it's starting to be important to have a strong mental game at 50 mile, but it will become even more important very soon, and get ready for that. But I think the 50 mile is a really fun distance, especially if you're looking for something that then you can sleep the night afterwards. I think the crowd also is very nice. Definitely the 50 mile for me is where I start falling in love with the ultra running community. It was a lot of ultra runner. That's where I felt the shift much more, the difference between road running and trail running. I saw it, the starkest contrast was when I started doing 50 miler. That's where people were helping me, people were cheering me, because you need that help. And I've mentioned it before, but people will help you, and if you can, try and help people, so that together we can have a better experience, and together we can push our limits.
Good spot with another look out. That's Hayward.
Ouch. Aaron Stinnie now is getting a full dose of exactly what the difference is, as Mike Tomlin would say, between playing on the JV and playing on the varsity. He was playing against the Steelers varsity defensive line. And
okay, now we go to 100K. And as I said, I kind of skipped the 50K when I was ramping up, but I did not skip the 100K. And it sounds like such a small difference to go from a 50 mile to 60 mile. Well, it's just 10 mile-ish, a little more. Yes, but there's a huge difference between the two. And for me at least, and that was that there's a significant portion of your 100K that will be at night. So in terms of new skill that you absolutely need to be pretty good at is running at night and running in various temperature. That might have happened for a 50 mile depending on the race you pick, but for 100K, you're gonna race in the morning where it could be a little bit cold, in the middle of the day where it could be scorching hot, and then it's going to be night again where it's going to be cold again. And now it's much harder than in the morning because you're tired, you're soaking wet. It's really hard to control your body temperature. So these things actually matter a lot, and for me I feel that the 100K is a pretty important experience to master these skills. And I think it's almost like a graduate course of the 50 mile. What applied there is even more so at 100K. You will not finish 100K if you don't master nutrition. I cannot emphasize how much it was really important for 50 mile. For the 100K, it's a breaking deal. It's not gonna happen if you cannot master that. And if you know that this is a struggle, then you should really work on that as much as possible. For the 100K, the mileage that I would suggest aiming for is probably between 50, 60 miles per week. So we're getting into very serious mileage. We're getting into the range where you have to watch out for injuries. And that's also something that at the 100K is getting more problematic, is to manage potential injuries, potentially doing some PT or some specific exercise to reinforce specific muscles if you're having specific pain. Very specific language here, right? But yeah, the 100K is probably where chronic injuries, it's something that you need to watch out for. Running is a rough sport. You can deal with it most of the time, but you need to be able to recognize when something is going wrong and when you need to do something about it rather than just ignoring it. So at the 100K distance, I think that's the other big difference, is you need to start to listen to your body much more. You need to understand what is too much, both in training and during the race, so that you avoid bigger problems.
Look out, whacked again. So they'll take a look at it upstairs. Was his arm coming forward or not?
Oh, that's close.
That's as close as it gets.
And now we go to the distance that is close to my heart. It's the 100 mile. And how it feels, the 100 mile, your mind will go through everything. That's true for every distance. But the 100 mile, unless you're a really strong runner, you're probably finishing that in 24 hours or more, meaning that you go through a whole cycle of day and night. And I think mentally that is very difficult to think, you're 10 hours within a race. After 10 hours, you're tired. And to think, yeah, I still have 14 hours. And then, at some point the sun goes down and it gets cold and you get tired and your brain is foggy. And unlike at 50 mile, maybe you were getting there, it's getting dark, but hey, I only have maybe 5 miles to go, and 100K similarly. Now it's not just the prospect of you still have to keep going, it's you have to keep going twice as long as you've done already, and you're absolutely destroyed. So I think that's where the mental game will always be important, but 100 mile, that is essential now. That is essential that you build a strong why and a strong will to reach that finish line, that you build different tools, different methods of fighting off that pain, keep moving. And there's so many ways, and I'm definitely going to cover that someday, but you need to master your mind at this distance. You need to master your willingness to push through adversity, to find solution, to accept that this is going to be a challenge, this is not going to be easy, but I'm going to keep pushing until the end. And you need to be able to face challenges relatively early on and be able to not panic, be able to stay grounded and say, yep, okay, I'm bleeding out of my asshole already and there's 80 miles to go and that's gonna take me 20 hours, so be it. It sounds way easier to do than it actually is. It's tough when things start going poorly to face the prospect of having to deal with it for so long. And for me, the 100 mile is really where that took a turn, where the mental game was the number one priority. The other thing that becomes more and more problematic now is that for intake for 100 mile, it's almost guaranteed that whatever plan you have, even if you're really good at eating or drinking like I am, you're likely gonna notice that at some point it gets much harder. Your body goes through a lot, and at some point you reach a level of fatigue that is very hard to even explain until you feel it. But a lot of your body function don't work nearly as well, and that will change what you can eat, and you need to watch out for that, to watch out for signs that maybe it's time to switch to new food, maybe it's time to try something new. You need to manage running at night, the full night. So now you need to absolutely master that. You need to be able to actually run at night, to not get lost at night, to deal with the cold. When it comes to mileage, for the 100 mile, I think a 70 mile a week, 60, 70 mile a week will prepare you very well. I think it's a kind of average to feel pretty strong, and I'm not gonna say not struggle. You're gonna struggle.
Second down and 10. Rodgers lets it fly, gets drilled at the end of it. Completely free, and you see the hit right here. He lowers his head, leads with the crown, and it's helmet to helmet. Oh.
And then we're brushing the even longer distance, so things beyond 100 mile. I think what is getting more and more popular is our 200 miler. You already had to deal with being tired for 100 mile, and especially some of the 100 miler take a very long time. My longest race took 50 hours, and you absolutely need to start dealing with sleep deprivation and sleep strategy. When am I gonna sleep? For how long? At the 200 mile or such race, that is one of the prime thing that you need to focus on now. The two main difference will be you need to pace yourself much smarter. Now walking is a big part of that, and you need to know when to walk, when to run, and be able to not take break unnecessarily, but at the same time having a sleeping schedule. How long are you gonna sleep and when, so that you're not too sleep deprived, because you're not gonna run 200 mile over potentially 5-day period without sleep. You're definitely gonna have to sleep at some point. It's one of the key things that one needs to master. The other one is that you're gonna be out there for very long time. If you have a crew or pacers, it's much more complex to manage that. So your crew needs to be kind of able to deal with these things. So the logistic gets much more complex. All right, that's it, folks. It's actually getting pretty dark here. I don't even know if you can still see me. High-level summary, half marathon distance, where there's a lot of skills beyond just running that you need to adjust to, which is a lot of uphill, downhill, technical running, more equipment, having its station being a little bit more sparse. Marathon distance will be physically, in my mind, a little harder than a road marathon, and there's much less focus on the pace, but much more focus on getting there. You also will face elements, so that's starting to be an issue. Then the 50 mile, that's the big turning point, is nutrition now is absolutely key. The 100K, the physical difference between a 50 mile and 100K is there, but I don't think that's the biggest transition. The biggest transition is that you'll run a significant portion of it at night, so you need to learn to run at night. And the mental game is starting to kick in. The mental game starts to be pretty important. When you step to 100 mile, that's a huge component of that, or new component, which is always there, but now your mental game needs to be top of the game. I hope it was helpful. If it was helpful, as always, really appreciate if you leave a thumbs up, if you leave a comment below if you agree, disagree with me, or if you have any question in general. So until next time.